Hi folks, Pastor Charles here. I was actually reading some stuff online this week that was talking about how in the age of AI, people appreciate authenticity. And of course, we know there are so many people who are vehemently against artificial intelligence. And I've spoken about it myself, and I certainly understand their sentiment. I am not the biggest fan in the world of it either, to be perfectly honest with you. I think there's obviously, the technology is fantastic. I mean, there's no question about it. The technology is utterly fantastic, and the potential for what it is going to be able to do is phenomenal. But at the same time, it's terrifying. It's one of those double-edged swords, it's we don't know what all could happen with it over the course of time. Like I said in a little video I made, yesterday or so, personally, I think it's years away. I really do, from being at a point where it could even potentially begin to slide in the dangerous direction. Honestly, I think we're probably at least 5 years away from it being fine-tuned enough that it would have the potential to go rogue. You know what I'm saying? It just, right now it's so full of kinks and there are so many bugs, and that's not even a possibility at the moment. But anyway, because I use AI to produce the music for my songs, I told Tommy when I first started sharing my stuff, I'm a blatantly honest person. I'm something of what is referred to as a hyper empath, okay? That means, if you understand the term empathic, it doesn't mean I'm psychic. I don't claim to be psychic. But some people, for reasons unknown to science and psychology, some people just develop this really honed ability to read people and to read cues, and they claim that a hyper empath like myself is able to detect even the slightest, tiniest little facial expression or body language, that somehow we're able to know things about people and what have you. I think it's God, but that's beside the point. But they, they have so much empathy. They feel so much that it's extremely difficult for them not to pick up on anything involving emotions or feelings. And I am that way. I'm going to tell you right now, I kid you not, I've been this way since I was a kid. I used to be ridiculed for it. I used to be made fun of for it, even in my own family, my brothers, my father, and they claim that people who are hyper-empathic, that's what happens to them. They become the subject of ridicule and what have you. And that was my experience. But because I was so hyper-empathic as a kid, being raised by a father who was a narcissist, and a malignant narcissist at that. I mean, this man is just a walking, talking, living, breathing, emotional nuclear bomb. That's the only way I know how to say it. And if you've never had to deal with somebody like him, and believe me, many, many people, including members of my own family, in recent years have had the opportunity to spend time with him, enough time with him to really start to see what he is. And they've told me, my God Almighty, I don't know how you survived growing up with him. When a psychologist I had begun to see as a teenager at 17, I was constantly going through deep depression. I used to struggle with depression, something awful. And this psychologist that I was seeing wanted to meet my parents, so I had them come in. I was shocked that my mother actually got my father to come in. He only came so he could ridicule and tell her I was a nut and I was crazy and blah, blah, blah. That's literally what he did. And after they had left and everything, and I was talking to her, she literally said to me, I was 17. She said, Charles, I don't know how you're alive today. She said, I honestly do not know how you're even alive today. She said, most people that grow up with parents, because it wasn't just one, there were major issues with both my parents. Mental health issues, and oh dear God, it was just a mess. She said, the very fact that you're alive at 17, she said, honestly, most people I know that if they ever were exposed to parents like that, she said they'd have killed themselves by the time they were 16. They'd have never made it past 16. Well, I used to struggle with depression. I wasn't suicidal most of the time. That didn't happen until I got actually a little bit older yet. I kind of wonder if her saying that didn't put the thought in my head. But anyway, so I tend to be really sensitive about a lot of things. And one of the things I really struggle with, something awful, I couldn't do anything right. And I couldn't do anything well. It didn't matter. I'm 60. And I still remember bringing home an all-A report card, being told I was on the honor roll and all this stuff. And I was so thrilled to be bringing home such a great report card. I think it was, I want to say I was in high school. And brought it home, and showed it to my mother. And then when my mother showed it to my father, I wasn't in the room, but I heard him. And his reaction was to just tear me down and tell her what an idiot I was. It didn't matter what a report card said. He's still an idiot, and he still doesn't know nothing. He still hadn't got any common sense, and he's a stinking worthless piece of... And that's what I heard. And that was my daily life, folks. That was not an occasional thing. My father didn't have bad moods. My father didn't have good moods, okay? He was constantly in a bad mood. He was constantly in that frame of mind that was destructive and negative and critical. And you would tell him something, and he would act like you were lying. Everything you said was a lie. You never told the truth. You didn't know what you were talking about. If you told him you went to a friend's house and they had a microwave, a box you could put food in, and it heated it up in a matter of minutes. And my father, you're lying. There's no such thing, And literally, it was everything. And the mind games, the constant mind games, constant lying, constant trying to think of the word they use. Projecting, everything he did, he'd project on everybody else. Gaslighting is the word I was looking for. The constant gaslighting, trying to tell you that you were crazy if you thought you heard him say something, or if you thought you saw him do something, or if you thought that you experienced something where he was concerned. And he didn't want you to believe what your own head, what you had seen, what you had heard, what you'd experienced. He would tell you were crazy and you were making that up and that wasn't real. And this was a everyday thing, folks. This was not once in a while. And people, I keep explaining this, and I do it for a reason. People do not understand. I've watched so many videos by psychologists and psychiatrists who deal with the adult survivors of narcissistic parents, and they talk about the fact that your body chemistry, Your psychological brain chemistry literally rewires itself in order to survive this kind of psychological abuse and constant, nonstop, relentless attacks on your sanity. And your brain has to literally create neural pathways that work differently than others people's neural pathways so that you can survive the insanity that is. Otherwise, you lose your mind. And I'll be honest with you, and I don't say this to be mean, because I love my mother. I love my mother more than my mother knows I love her. I've wanted to get her help for decades, and she won't take it. I've tried and tried and tried. But I believe that's the cause of the majority of her mental health issues and her struggles. And it has messed her up so bad because she spent 20 years in a marriage with a man who tore her down, shredded her, ripped her up. I mean, did it to his kids, did it to his wife, embarrassed us in public every opportunity he had, tore us down in front of every person we ever stood with him in front of, whether that be family, friends, neighbors, strangers, it didn't matter. He would tear us down and tell people what a worthless wife he had, what worthless kids he had, but I mean, constantly, folks. This is what I grew up with. Say, well, preacher, why are you saying all this? I'm saying all this to try to help you understand. Although I'm going to tell you right now, I've learned the internet has taught me one thing, and people don't care. All right, I know most people, and probably including you, don't give a crap about one word I'm saying, because it doesn't affect your life, so what difference does it make? I have a bad habit, which is they claim it's something that adult survivors of narcissistic parents, it's something that we tend to do, and that is we are constantly feel the need to explain ourselves. And that's one of the traits that I absolutely have. I'm constantly explaining myself to Tommy. I'm constantly apologizing. I'm constantly, these are all things that are part and parcel of somebody who's been through the experience that I've been through coming up. And some people say, well, you're 60, just get over it. It doesn't work that way. When you grow up in a household with somebody like this, from the minute you're born till you leave home, and I left home at 16, went out on my own at 16, your neurochemistry is already rewired. You've already had to develop all kinds of mechanisms to try to survive the insanity, and unfortunately, it creates traits in you that people don't understand. And one of the traits I have that people don't understand is I'm very defensive. I'm constantly on the defense. It is very difficult for me to deal with people attacking me. It's very difficult for me to deal with people making accusations or false accusations. That's part of the whole narcissistic it's part of their toolkit, that they use, constantly throwing accusations, constantly accusing you. I could bring, for instance, a song to my father. I never did. I never would, because I wasn't crazy. But if I brought, for instance, a song to my father and he read it, which I don't even know if he'd do that. But anyway, bottom line is he would say, you didn't write this. You didn't write that. I don't know where you got this from, but you didn't write it. Literally, folks, that's what I would have gotten every single time. Okay, every single time. I have never in my life gotten credit for anything that I've done. Like I said, I could bring home an all-A report card, and never once did I get a pat on the back and simply had my father say, good job. Never. Not one time. He wouldn't know how to do that. I'll tell you right now, he wouldn't know how to do it. You've never seen a man, I promise you, you've never seen a man as destructive and evil as that man is. But again, that's beside the point. When I began to write when I began to take songs that I had written 40 years ago, 45 years ago, I've been writing songs for decades. And for all these years, I kept them written somewhere. Because I don't have the best memory. Like, I've written poetry. I love poetry. I've written poetry. I actually have a collection of poetry that is copyrighted through the Library of Congress. I did it decades ago. Copyrighted it, that is. And matter of fact, I was going to try to turn one of my poems into a song, and when I put it into the computer program to do so, it wouldn't let me because it was copyrighted. And I said, but it's mine, it's my own poem. But I couldn't use it because it's copyrighted. And anyhow, I've been writing poetry and songs for years. Growing up in the household I grew up in, I never had the opportunity to study music. I never had the opportunity to take an instrument. My father wasn't about to pay for me to study piano. I wanted to. I would have loved to have learned to play the piano many years ago. I would have loved to. Never had the opportunity. I've sung my entire life. I've been singing since I was very young. And I used to be able to sing very well, believe it or not. When I joined the high school choir at Naugatuck High School in Naugatuck, Connecticut, I had transferred out of a private Christian school to the public school. I wanted to go back to public school. I told my mother, I just want to go back to the public school, save my mother money, and everything. And I said, I'm just as happy to go to public school. So I transferred kind of at the middle of the first semester, in my sophomore, I think it was freshman or sophomore, I can't quite remember year. And when I did, one of the classes that I signed up for was to be in the choir. Well, the choir director, Mr. Davis, who was a lovely man, he was a Mormon man, which breaks my heart, but he was a wonderful, lovely man. He said, I'm coming in, mind you, mid-semester, and he said, I need to take you into rehearsal room, and we need to go through the chord progressions, and I need to have you go up and down the scales so I can determine where you fall in, your range and what have you. So we went into a private rehearsal room with a piano, and he began to do the la 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 la, up an octave, la 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 la, up an octave, la 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 la. I can't do it anymore because of my allergies. I can't breathe. I don't have breath control like I used to. But anyway, we're going up the scales, up the scales, up the scales, up the scales, and we kept going. And I used to have a range like you wouldn't believe. I could get way up into my falsetto, but I wasn't embarrassed by it. See, a lot of guys, I don't think it's that they can't do it. They just get embarrassed and they don't want to. They feel like it makes them girly. I didn't care. If I could sing a note way up here somewhere, I wanted to sing it. And so anyway, we did that. Then you do the reverse scales where you're going down, la 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. And you keep going downward. And we kept going down, and we kept going down, and we kept going down, and we kept going down. And Mr. Davis said, my God, I've never known anybody has the range you've got. He said, my Lord, have mercy. He said, man, what do you do fifth period? And it just so happened that my fifth period, I was free. I had what they used to call a study period, or study hall, And so I said, I don't have a class fifth period. He said, you do now. He said, you're in concert choir. So, okay. So I went out to the main choir room, and I had made one new friend at this school named Patrick O'Brien. And Patrick and he was in the choir with me, And I sat next to him and I said, "What is the concert choir?" And Patrick said, "Oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that." He said, Mr. Davis does auditions for concert choir at the beginning of the year. And he said, "You have to be like the cream of the crop. You have to be the best of the best to get into the concert choir." And he said, "And the rehearsals were weeks ago, and you weren't here for that." He said, "So don't worry about it for now." He said, "Maybe you can try out next year." And I looked at him and I said, "I don't have to try out." I said, "Mr. Davis told me that he wanted me in concert choir." And my friend Patrick was delirious. He's like, "You're kidding me. Oh my goodness, you're kidding me. I can't. He told you to do." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "He told me I've got a study hall 5th period." And he told me, "No, you don't. You're in concert choir." So Patrick told me, he said, "You must be really, really good." Well, again, I share this simply to say, I've sung in choirs. I've sung in church choirs. I moved to Texas when I was 16 years old at the direction of the Spirit of God. And I joined the choir at the high school in Texas. The director there did the same identical thing. I went to Texas in February of 1982 at the age of 16. And she did the same thing. She fell in love with me and my voice, and everything she did, she wanted me to be the main lead, you know. And when we were going to do our senior play for the year, they were doing Bye Bye Birdie, and she took me aside and said, "Charles, I have to do open auditions because that's just our policy, you know." She said, "However, I know you're the person to play Conrad Birdie, you know, and Bye Bye Birdie. You're the person to play that part." She said, "So you've got that part. Just know that before I even do any auditions." And so back in the day, I could really, really sing. When I was young, especially, boy, howdy, I could sing. And I sang every opportunity I get. People used to ask me, "Do you make any records?" Yeah, when I was preaching evangelistically, they'd ask me, "Do you make any records? Do you have any records?" I said, "No, I've never made a record." And then at some point, probably in my late teens, like 19, 20, around the time I began pastoring my very first church, I kind of looked into it. I contacted Brentwood Studios in Brentwood, Tennessee and everything. And I was trying to find out how much it cost to make a record. And folks, in the 80s, it was thousands upon thousands of dollars. You have to rent a studio. You have to hire a producer. You have to hire an engineer, a sound engineer, you know, all these things. And so, plus, if you're going to have any kind of background singers or whatever, or if you use pre-recorded, because Brentwood actually is a major publisher of background tapes. They used to produce cassette tapes way back then. That's what I used when I sang in church. I'd use their cassette tape background music, or soundtracks, I should say, for when I would sing specials, you know. And it was common for people to do that back then. Now, they eventually moved into CDs, and now you can actually buy them and download them online. You don't even have to buy a physical CD or anything anymore. So anyway, I learned real fast how cost prohibitive it was to go to a studio and make a recording, you know, and all that. I had a friend, a man that I adore. I grew up knowing him. He was friends with my grandparents, had been for years. He was a preacher who sang, and he was formerly a nightclub singer. This is back in the day, you know, like he probably sang in clubs way back in the 40s and 50s or something to that effect, and 60s maybe. But he had come to the Lord, and he no longer sang secular, but he sang for the Lord, and he preached. And he was a marvelous Christian man named Mike Lestick. And Mike was a terrific human being and a wonderful Christian man. He and his wife, Barbara, were amazing people. And I invited them to come sing in my first church. They actually helped come sing in my very first church. I had known them for years and years, and he wouldn't even take our money. He wouldn't even let me pay him. I wanted to, but he said, no, Chuck, said, you take whatever you collect. He helped me with a 3-day revival, and he said, whatever you collect, he said, I want you to use it for your new work. He was an incredible man of God. Well, Mike sang amazing. I mean, he was a professional, and he was an incredible tenor, you know. And one day he told me, he said, Chuck, you and I sing in the same keys. He said, you actually can sing everything I sing. And he said, if you ever want any of my soundtracks, now mind you, this man paid to have every soundtrack he had made. He hired the musicians and the whole 9 yards to make his soundtracks for him, okay? And he told me, he said, if you ever want any of my soundtracks, just ask me, and I'll give them to you. And I never did ask him for any of his soundtracks. Part of it was because I didn't sing necessarily the same type of songs he sang. I always tended towards Southern. I love Southern gospel. That's why I write so much Southern gospel. I love Southern gospel. He did a lot more contemporary. And again, this is back in the 80s and 90s. And, you know, he since has gone on to his reward. But back in those days especially, I leaned toward much more traditional Christian music and Southern gospel style. You know, there was some more contemporary that I did, like He Grew the Tree that he knew would be used to make the old rugged cross. And in the 80s, when I moved to Texas, I used to sing a lot. When he was on the cross, I was on his mind, which was at that time a very contemporary song. And songs like People Need the Lord, and songs like Andre Crouch, Through It All, I've learned to trust in Jesus, I've learned to trust my God, you know. So I did sing contemporary stuff, but Mike and I didn't necessarily sing the same contemporary stuff. And so I never asked him for any of his soundtracks. But I say all that. I'm simply saying all that. There's actually a little bit of logic behind why I'm taking all this time to share this, folks. When you sing in choirs, you learn music. You learn how to read notes. You learn how to understand the different parts, the different roles, soprano, alto, tenor, baritone, bass. You understand the ranges. You understand what range they sing in and what they're capable of. How, you know, 4-part harmony is divided into 4 parts and what each part does. And, you know, everybody's not all singing the same melody. When you do 4-part harmony, everybody's not singing the same notes. If you listen to the bass singing all by themselves, you'd think, what the devil are they singing? And if you listen to the altos sing by themselves, a lot of times you'd be like, what on earth are they singing, you know? The lead person is singing the main melody, but the others are all singing complementary notes, you know? And so, so I know a good deal about music. I don't know how to write it. I don't know the first thing in the world about how to write it, but I know how to read it. I understand the mechanics of it, the basics of music, from singing in choirs and things over all those years, and just singing all those years. I've done my own worship leading now for over 30 years because our church, our ministry has just been so slow growing, and it's been such a difficult row to hoe. And can't get anybody that wants to work for the Lord to come to church. If they come to church, they just want to sit in the pew and do nothing, literally. That's literally. When you do the type of work I've been doing now for the last 33 years, people that are willing to come, at least in my experience. And now other preachers that have been able to get musicians to come to church and play, and I don't know what on earth it is about my ministry, but I just couldn't get anybody to come do nothing. And so we were without musicians. We didn't have anybody do worship leading, nothing. And so for all those decades, I was doing my own worship leading. Well, I also created every single video of worship music that we use in our church. I put the lyrics together with the music. I literally typed in the lyrics. I placed it so that the lyrics were there at the right time in the music so people in church could read the words and sing, while the video was playing. And I created hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these videos with hymns and choruses and worship songs and what have you. Well, all that kind of led up to the moment when AI came along and programs were developed that allowed you to create music of your own. And, you could interject your lyrics and it would actually have singers sing your lyrics. And then on top of that, you could upload a file. You make it on the phone just like I'm talking to you now through my phone. I could do a digital file singing my song. Victory, victory, hallelujah. I am free. Thanks to him, I now can live eternally. Oh, I wished I had a voice and breath. But anyhow, that was a song that I wrote when I was 17 years old. I had just gone back to Texas. My mother had come to Texas after I did by about 5 or 6 months. And then all of a sudden my father convinced her, and I knew it was a deceit. I knew it was a trick. He had to control everything, and she left him. So he was going to do whatever he had to get her to come back just so he could be in control. You don't take control away from a narcissist. So he gave her every line she wanted to hear to convince her to come back. And she wanted me to go back with my brothers and she as well. And I told her, Mom, no, I'm not going. You're walking right back into the same frying pan you left and you don't know it. Said, I'm not going. And we wound up just constantly, having bickering and stuff. And finally I went to Brother Gillum at the Riverside Church of God, my pastor that I adored and a man that I respect so highly. And those of you that have followed my ministry for any length of time, I talk about him almost all the time. He was one of my most valued influences in my walk with God as well as ministry. I learned so much from that man, it wasn't even funny, about old-time religion and letting the Holy Ghost move and letting the Spirit of God have His way and seeing miracles and signs and wonders. I'm telling you, my experience with him and his church was just wonderful. It was mind-blowing. It was wonderful. And so I went to Brother Gillum and I told him, I said, Mom and I are just in constant conflict. She's about ready to go back to Connecticut. She wants me to go with her. I said, I don't want to go. The Lord told me to come here. I said, I'm going to stay. And Brother Gillum said to me, he said, Chuck, go back with your mom. He said, son, you don't want a bad note between the two of you. You don't want conflict between the two of you. He said, go back with her. He said, and if the Lord wants you here, He knows you're not disobeying what He told you to do. You're trying to keep peace and, act in wisdom and what have you. He said, but if the Lord wants you back, He said, He'll make a way to bring you back where there will not be this conflict. Well, when Brother Gillum spoke these words to me, I just somehow in my spirit, I felt the anointing of the Holy Ghost. And I said, you know what? God, the Lord has just given him a word of wisdom for me. So I did exactly what he said. I went back to Connecticut with my mother. And I'm not going to go into the whole story. It'd take way too much time. But the Lord used somebody that hadn't been to my church that I grew up in 15 years. I was 16 at the time. And this man had left our church to go off and live his own life and preach. He was a preacher. His ministry took him places, and he had literally not been back to the church I grew up in for 15 years. But he saw me as a baby. When I was first born, he saw me before he left. And then my mother grew up with him, all of her brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, everybody grew up with him. And my grandmother, of course, knew his parents and grandparents, and, they had a long history. So when he was going to come preach at the church I grew up in, now I was in the Church of God by then, so I was just as happy to go to the West Haven Church of God and visit, and worship. But because this man, Nori Kogel, was going to be at the church I grew up in, I had never heard him preach. I only heard his name because, I was way too young to remember him. So I wanted to go hear him, Long story short, I did. Long story short, he wound up prophesying over me. And he did it. And it was in front of every member, because everybody in my family, I kid you not, there was not one single person that was not in that sanctuary that day. Every aunt, every uncle, my grandparents, you name it, everybody was there. And this man prophesied over me that God had called me to preach, that the Lord anointed me to a prophetic ministry, that I was going to declare, thus saith the Lord, and that I would speak correction and reproof to the church, and that when I did, I was not to care, I was not to be concerned with the reaction of my audience. That was not my job. My job was to declare, thus saith the Lord. And he said, people are going to call you crazy. They're going to claim you're insane because you are going to say things that they do not want to hear, but that the church needs to hear. This man prophesied over me for I don't know how long, 10, 12 minutes probably. Every member of my family was there to hear it. And when he got done and we went to the car and we were trying to go home from church, my mother said to me, "You're going back to Texas if I got to pay your way myself." She said, "Nori just confirmed that what you said was so. If God told you he wanted you in Texas, then you need to be in Texas." See, Brother Gillum was right. If the Lord wanted me in Texas, he would find a way to help me get there so that there was no conflict between my mother and I, and that's what God did. Now again, I'm sharing all this. If I struggle with anything in my life, folks, trying to get back to the first part of what I was talking about, I don't seek praise. I don't care about praise. I don't care about money. I don't care about praise. Those are two things that I promise you. God is my eternal witness. I have never in my entire ministry cared 2 bits about money. I've preached in so many churches, hadn't been given a nickel, or I've preached in little tiny churches that gave me $20, $15, and I took it and was happy. And many times I wound up handing it right back to them because they were doing a roof repair fundraiser or something, and I'd say, "Well, here, let me start your offering out by giving you back what you just gave me." You've never met a purist like I am. You've never met a biblical purist like I am. I try the best I know how to live the book the way it means for us to live, and I do a pretty poor job of it, I'm afraid. But I don't play games with the Word of God. This is one reason why I had to stop preaching. Because the Word of God said, "Do not cast your pearl before the swine." Don't you take something as valuable as the ministry that God has given you and the Word that God has put in you and just throw it out there for people to trample on. And the scripture teaches, if you cannot get support, then you need to get up and move on. You do not stay somewhere that you are not being supported. That's what Jesus meant when he talked about when you go into a city, and he said, if they don't receive you, shake the dust off your clothes and move on. If you look at that text, if you look at everything he said, what you see is he was literally saying, if they do not provide the support necessary so that you can stay there and minister without having to somehow support yourself to do it, he said, that's the test. That's how you know whether or not a community is receptive of your message and your ministry and your anointing. I spent 32 years trying to do progressive Pentecostal affirming ministry, and I'm just going to talk plain. And our community has given me no support whatsoever. They're not interested in my ministry. There are a lot of affirming ministries out there that they're perfectly happy to support, apparently. But mine's not one of them. And finally, after years and years of struggle, and I kept going and kept going, and I kept bearing the cost of it myself, and it was driving me into bankruptcy. I still have tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt that I pay every month because of years and years and years and years of doing this. I finally had to say, okay, you know what? It's time to stop. It is just time to stop. And thankfully, the Lord allowed the timing to fall in where within a year of my doing that, it hadn't even been a year yet, but within the first year, this AI music technology came available, and I've been able to shift gears. And all of a sudden now, I've been able to turn all my ministry attention and ministry energy and prophetic energy into my music. If you listen to a lot of my songs, folks, you'll realize they are prophetic. They are prophecy. When I speak in the first person, in other words, when the song lyric is Jesus speaking, when did you ever hear me say thus and so? When did you ever hear me say thus and so? I'm actually writing music lyrics in the prophetic. And I've got several songs that are deeply prophetic. And I do not use AI for the writing of a single line of lyric, not for one word, okay? After I have published the song and put music to it and everything and put it online, I will sometimes take the lyrics and then at the bottom I'll add the prompts, all the instructions that I used for the AI music programs, and I'll run it through Google AI. What do they call it? Gemini. And what I ask it to do is give me I call it at a glance feedback on this song based on the lyrics and the prompts, So in other words, it kind of gets an idea of what the music would sound like. Because unfortunately, the AI is not to the point where you can actually upload a recording and it can so-called hear the recording. It can't do that, So I just give it the words, the lyrics that I've written, and the prompts that I used as my primary prompts. Usually when I give it the lyrics, I'll include the lyrics I used in the AI music program. So that means it includes within the lyrics a number of commands, which are referred to as prompts, in brackets that you use throughout your song to indicate, I want the tenor to sing this line, I want the alto to sing this line, I want the choir to come in, I want the choir to come in powerfully, I want a saxophone solo right here, a musical interlude. I want a saxophone interlude, what have you. All these prompts that you put in. And what I would do is I'd give the Google AI, and I'll tell you why I did this the first time. Honestly, it's because I'm so insecure. And I wanted to know, does this even look like it would be a decent song, a good song or whatever, And every single time, I kid you not, AI came back and said, "You've written an amazing song. This is an incredible song. The message is clear." And one of the things I told Tommy, I said, look at this. I said, the AI is saying to me on certain of my songs, this is a powerful prophetic song. You're speaking in the first person as God. Therefore, you are literally doing what the Old Testament prophets did. And I never said a word I never even mentioned the word prophetic. But the AI, the Gemini, came back and said, this song is prophetic. And it gave me these positive reviews, for my songs. They said the lyrics were very creative, and it would point to certain specific things like where you say this, where this line is amazingly creative, and the image that it paints, and blah, 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 That's all I wanted. I kind of wanted a review of it, more or less, And since then, I have submitted several of my songs through the Nashville Songwriters Association International, NSAI. It is a organization. If you're a songwriter, you can join this organization. They have all kind of benefits in it. Helps you to learn about the business and helps you, make contacts and what have you. I just joined it recently. And one of the things they allow you to do is you can submit a song, and they have really seasoned, professional, long songwriters, been in it for a long time, who are willing to look at your song and critique it from a very technical. It's a very technical critique, okay? And they look at the rhyme, they look at the rhythm, they look at the cadence, they look at the concept of the song and whether or not you clearly communicated your concept, all this sort of stuff. It's very technical. And every one of my reviews came back, and the only thing they had to say about my song was it was too long for radio. They said if you wanted to be able to market this to publishers and performers to perform on radio, it's too long for radio. They said you might be able to get your song that you've made on the radio if you just cut it down in length. Has to be under 3.5 minutes. Apparently that's kind of a radio standard. A song, they like songs to be under 3.5 minutes. Well, a lot of my songs are longer than that. I always have been verbose, Then on top of that, the arrangements that I've given a lot of my songs, like I'll do verse, chorus, and then maybe a bridge, and then chorus, And this writer or writers who reviewed my songs, critiqued my songs, they were saying to me, well, all you'd have to do is cut out one of the additional choruses, and instead of doing verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, just do verse, chorus, verse, chorus, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro. And so anyway, they kind of give me advice on how I could cut it down and edit it so that it would fall within the 3.5 minute mark. And I am going to be doing some what they refer to as radio edits, That is, I'm going to take some of my songs that are a little long, and I'm going to try to cut them down and redo the arrangement so that hopefully they'll come under that 3.5 minute. And they said sometimes you might be able to push it to 4, but you really, if you want to guarantee it can make radio, it needs to be under 3.5. So I'm going to be making some. But right now, folks, I'm telling you, God's anointed me. I've been writing songs every day. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. And if you knew me, you'd understand that this really isn't altogether unusual for me. There are times I'd write sermons. I'd get sermon ideas, and I'd have the Lord be giving me ideas for messages, and I'd wind up with a stack of messages ahead of time. And then I'd be praying, well, Lord, you got to tell me when to preach it, because I don't preach a message out of turn. So I would literally just sit on those messages, and oftentimes he'd give me a new one for this Sunday, and I'd be preaching new stuff. And then all of a sudden, we'd get to a certain Sunday, and he'd say, this week, I want you to preach that message I gave you a month ago or 2 months ago. And so it's not uncommon for me to be real prolific. But for many years, I felt like my music was going to die with me. I was never going to hear my song performed at any level. And because I can't write music. I tried to inquire of music departments at colleges to see if they had any music students who might be interested in my paying them to write sheet music for my song, and I couldn't find anybody. I just have never been successful at finding anybody to do anything. Like, I'm one of those people, if I have a lawsuit that I could sue somebody, and I did, a couple of times I've had some situations where I could have sued somebody, I could never find a lawyer to take my case. Every lawyer I'd talk to, they'd be like, well, we really don't handle those kind of cases. And for whatever reason, I just have, the old saying, the luck of the Irish. I just have the luck of the Irish. I can't find nobody, no kind of way to help me with nothing. And maybe it's because I'm looking the wrong places. I don't know how to look. I don't know. But that's the way it's been. And so when this AI come along, and I said, you mean to tell me I can sing the tune of my song into a recording, and it can take the tune I sang and make actual music according to the tune I sang, and then all I have to do is feed it the lyrics and the tune, and it'll put it together and create music. I can decide which instruments, I can decide which voices, I can decide male or female, I can decide choir, duet, quartet, what have you. I can literally decide trio. I can decide whatever I want, and I can make it happen. I was so excited I could spit. Man, I was delirious out of my mind. I told Tommy, I said, oh my God, I'm so happy. I said, I thought for sure I would never in my lifetime hear any of my songs sung by anybody, But now at least I can get a computer generated version of it. I said, and it comes out beautiful. It comes out sounding wonderful, And I said, man, this just makes me so happy, and it does. Well, of course, you get all these AI haters who are out there just chewing me up, spitting me out for using AI, and it's, you're not a real artist, and you're not this, and you're not that, and blah, blah, blah. And honestly, this is the point I was trying to make from the start of this video, as long as it's been. I don't handle personal attacks well. I don't handle people. Listen, folks, it has nothing to do with pride. It has nothing to do with ego. It does have something to do with self-esteem. I've never gotten credit in my life for anything that I do, good, bad, or otherwise. And all I want, I write this stuff, okay? I write it. Don't tell me I didn't write every word of my songs, because I know I did. I know the hours I invest in it. I know the effort that I put into producing every single one of my songs, the money I'm investing, I've already invested thousands of dollars on programs, and I use more than one, way more than one program. And I'll sometimes take something from one program and bring it over to another one because there's something I can do over here that I couldn't do over here. You know, literally, you wouldn't believe the work that goes into this. And I work hard, just like my ministry. I worked hard, and nobody gave a crap. Nobody cared. Nobody supported me. Didn't matter how hard I worked. Whether I had 1,000 people in church or one person, I worked every bit as hard for the one as I would have if I'd had 1,000 listening. I don't put in less effort because I got fewer people. No, I was sharing online, so I don't know how many people are watching. I put the same energy, the same effort into everything I did in ministry that I would put in if I had a church with 400 members or better. And yet in all those years, I begged and pleaded people, please be supportive. And I don't just mean with money. I mean, just please be supportive. I used to beg people, please like our videos, please share our videos, please comment on our video. I couldn't get people to do it. Could not get people. Nobody wanted to do it. You wonder why I quit preaching? That's why, right there. Be one thing if, it's one thing if people won't give to help pay so I can do what I'm doing. It's another thing when you beg and plead for emotional support, because it's hard for me, very hard for me with my PTSD. It's very hard for me to do something without somebody reflecting back some kind of support for what I'm doing. And doing affirming ministry for over 30 years and not being able to get people to be the least bit supportive and encouraging and consistent and what have you. Folks, you have no idea what a miracle that was for me. Because normally, I guarantee you, I'd have quit after, I don't know if I'd have gone a year. Honestly, I don't think I would have gone a year. But somehow God gave me the stamina, and I kept going and kept going. I begged, I pleaded. People heard me griping and groaning online all the time. Y'all wondered, why in the world does this preacher go into these diatribes about needing people to be supportive? And why does he tell us about what he grew up with and how hard it is and his PTSD and stuff? What is he, mentally ill? No, I'm just blatantly honest. I'm not sharing this stuff because I get some jolly out of telling you my story. Believe me, I'd rather not ever have to talk about it if I had my way. I'm trying my best to see if I can't generate some empathy, which I couldn't. So that's why I quit. Said, that's it. You know what? I've done everything in my power. People don't want to give financially, so I'm on my own. If I drown, nobody gives a fire. If I go bankrupt, nobody cares. If I stop preaching, nobody cares. Nobody's written me and said, Pastor, I sure wish you were back doing services. I sure wish services were live again. And blah, blah. I haven't been getting letters and emails from people and calls from people. Nope. Which tells me that my ministry was a waste of time for 33 years. I've got thousands of sermons online right now that when I die, they'll still be online. I've got a legacy a mile long. And now I'm adding, thank God, to that legacy with music. But I said all this to say, I'm going to start sharing videos, short videos, about different songs that I've written so that people can understand the context behind the song. And this video I'm doing now is just about to hit an hour. I'm a minute away. So I'm going to cut it off right, at an hour. But I'm going to be sharing short videos talking about the inspiration for the song, the content of the song, why I used certain lines, why I did certain things. because I've been reading and they said people appreciate this and they enjoy this, and it helps them to understand the authenticity of the authorship of the song. So that is my plan, okay? So keep your eyes open, because very soon I'm going to begin to share these short videos about various songs that I've written and that I'm writing, okay? I appreciate your time. Folks, God bless you in Jesus' name. Keep me in your prayers, because I sure do need it, okay? You may not miss my ministry, but I miss it. God bless.